The fighting genre is set for a kick up the jacksie in 2015, with Mortal Kombat, Tekken 7 and Dead or Alive 5 all arriving to bolster the ranks, to name but three. However, thanks to the genre's propensity to champion bashing the tar out of everything, it lends itself perfectly to any superheroic mashup you can think of. Such was Paradox's Mutant Academy, and the first time a superhero-themed game had a substantial amount of depth as a fighter in 3 dimensions, bringing with it awesomely detailed character models, very meaty, hard-hitting animations, and a color palette that made the whole thing leap off the screen. In short, it was spectacular, and with a roster comprised of franchise heavyweights like Wolverine, Beast and Gambit, every brawl played out exactly like you'd imagined it would. Definitely one for fans of the character more than the rest. Seasoned comic writer Daniel Way's video game version of Deadpool doubled down on the more potentially annoying aspects of outspoken sock-headed mercenary, whilst also upping the ante on the self-awareness factor too, making Deadpool imminently aware he's in a video game production. Fighting as the constantly talking hero, voiced by Nathan Drake himself. Nolan North, you had access to everything from his twin pistols to signature blades, and even the ability to teleport Nightcrawler style, whilst the script lived to shatter the fourth wall at regular intervals, a bit of a throwback to the 3D action adventures of old. If you're looking for something as polished as, say, God of War or Devil May Cry, you'd be left disappointed. But for Deadpool fans or those that can check their brain in at the door in favor of some really wacky approaches to game design, this was a real treat. Over to the darker side of the Marvel library, and a character the silver screen just can't seem to get right. Thomas Jane's portrayal in 2004 was way too light on action, and 2011's Ray Stevenson upped that aspect, but forgot to nail anything like, say, good acting or a believable narrative. Instead, Punisher's time to shine would be the 2004 tie-in of sorts to that original Thomas Jane movie, with Jane himself reprising the role. He did a fantastic job too, delivering many deadpan one-liners that easily connoted Garth Ennis' Max comic series, alongside a plethora of characters and bucketloads of gore to boot. The big innovation, and the reason the game was forced to have a black and white filter applied to some scenes, was the ability to grab any enemy and torture them for the LEGO game formula has been everywhere from Middle-earth to Hogwarts, stopping off in a couple of snake-infested tombs along the way. But arguably the best, certainly the most colorful, use of the license so far was this Avengers-style tie-in that let you play as pretty much anyone you could think of. Even Howard the Duck, everywhere from the SHIELD helicarrier to New York in general, complete with flame-accessoried Statue of Liberty, was lovingly crafted. And when you could fly around the city streets as Iron Man before switching to Venom for the sake of leaping around and fighting plenty other characters, it was the perfect application of a game engine custom built to appeal to as many people as possible. He may be known for his work as the Joker in the Arkham series, but Mark Hamill also warped his pipes to accommodate a far more growly range when taking up Wolverine in this X2 movie tie-in, a bit rough around the edges. Upon reflection, it remains one of those games any Marvel fan snatched up at the time, not caring about resolutions, or the difference between 50 and 60 frames per second. Instead, this was an excuse to essentially play as the Wolverine we all knew and loved from the X-Men animated series, factoring in a few branching level paths, some fantastic combat that let you take on multiple guys at once, and some brutally stab-happy animations, and a stealth system that, although very primitive, worked well. Fleshed out by memorable characters like Sabretooth and Wendigo, a host of unlockable costumes, Some context-specific kills like chucking a guy head first through a giant TV screen and a hefty overall runtime, this is very much worth any fan's time. The first X-Men Legends was a genre-defining affair, introducing the quintessential isometric combat first made popular by the likes of Baldur's Gate and Diablo, and refining it for a whole new generation. Raven Software then knew exactly what they were doing, heading into Part 2, adding in then revolutionary online matchmaking and expanding the roster to include a swath of characters both good and evil, playable heroes extended across Magneto, Juggernaut and even Professor X if you could unlock him, and although you fought in real time whilst balancing certain abilities and elemental attacks against specific foes. This was a stat-tracking RPG at heart. It's a real shame there's only been a couple of these titles, as especially since the X-Men have been dominating on the silver screen. It's more than high time for a comeback. Sometimes even though a title straight up rips off another, if it's done with the right amount of care and attention, it can still be a fantastic game, such is the case with the movie tie-in for Captain America, the first Avenger, in that, it's just one palette swap away from being a Batman Arkham spin-off. To be fair, it's not the first game to do this sort of thing. Sleeping Dogs and Shadow of Mordor have both featured Batman's combat too. But with Cap it excelled through access to an array of jaw-smashing special moves alongside that iconic bullet-deflecting shield to see you through. And that's not to mention the satisfying clang whenever you clocked some Nazi scum over the head with it. Super Soldier was just an excuse to use the Captain America license in video game form, providing ample excuse to get stuck in and do everything you'd seen from the movies. It didn't much matter if it had been done before years prior, as when you were pinging the shield around a room whilst laying waste to any close-quarters thugs with some satisfying high kicks, all whilst Chris Evans and Haley Atwell provided voice duties. This was a remarkably solid effort for a hero that desperately needs more solo outings. There's always going to be a debate trying to pick the best Marvel vs. Capcom game out the bunch. Some fans will scream it's the second one with its core feel of combat stepping up what the first started, and others say the amount of screen-filling special moves you could spam the living daylights have ruined everything, giving it to MVC3's roster to take the cake. Chances are whichever you played first will be your own personal favorite, as they're all remarkably tight Street Fighter-styled fighters built from the masters of the genre to appeal to both fans of fighters in general, and any Marvelite who's wanted to watch something like Spidey and Wolverine take on Ryu and Ken. It can definitely get pretty hectic when trying to keep track of all the different modes your fighter can be in, or when best to deploy their specials. But when said special in Deadpool's case is whacking your opponent with his own life bar, you'll be hard-pressed to find something so immediate and gleefully satisfying. When Ang Lee's 2003 version of the character focused a little too much on the introspective, oh woe is me, nature of the character, he ended up leaving out something that the Avengers would then nail in 2012, the fact that wherever there is Hulk, there must also be smashing, and lots of it. For ultimate destruction, Radical Entertainment saw this gigantic gap in the market and filled with all manner of ludicrous feats of destructive strength, from leaping multiple city blocks in single bounds to a weaponizing mechanic that saw you tear a police car in two before using the halves as boxing gloves. Everything about Hulk was one gigantic step in the most anarchically right direction. Later levels ran out of steam in the challenge department and elected to simply throw more and more goons your way. But when you could catch missiles out of midair and suplex Harrier jump jets at the push of a button, this was like the desert scene from the aforementioned movie X-1000. There's a certain Spidey-centric title everyone points to whenever they have to mention the one game that completely nailed the feel of soaring through the city whilst hanging by a silken thread, but that overlooks Treyarch's fantastic entry that saw an animation style more in line with the ultimate look of the character take center stage, opening at the end of days with an apocalyptic event caused by a symbiote infection. The resulting flashback playthrough to get you back to that point included a host of Marvel favorites, as well as throwing out new mashup what-if creations like the symbiote version of Wolverine or Black Cat. Combat was eminently fast and fluid, with Spidey's sense providing an Arkham-style counterprompt, alongside the brilliant addition of chaining an infinite number of hits together with web-zip attacks that would instantly take you across the map or allow you to stay in mid-air when fighting someone like the Vulture. Factor in Spidey's own symbiote costume that could be toggled at the click of the stick to switch up his moveset and allow for some far more brutal ground-and-pound moves. And this is easily one of the best incarnations of the webhead so far. Developer Raven Software really don't get enough credit. Not only did they give you the phenomenal X-Men Legends discussed earlier, but also this X-Men Origins movie tie-in. The only good thing to come from the first Wolverine-themed spin-off back in 2009 by a long shot. Combat was straight-up God of War, with plenty of combos and eviscerating grapples put to good effect. However, the really sweet thing that no developer before or since has done is actually model in real time Wolverine's healing factor. The character model here had a skeletal structure, complete with muscle tissue and flesh layered on top, meaning that every blade or bullet that connected would tear him apart, only to reconstitute as you moved on. It was a fantastically subtle innovation that instantly made fans of the character know Raven understood and cared about the character. And when they let him loose doing everything from skydiving without a parachute straight into an enemy's head to downing a helicopter by throwing its pilot amongst the rudders in mid-air, it's easily the best use of Wolverine's many talents across any solo effort. Say the words "Good Spider-Man" and "Game" consecutively, and chances are someone in the nearby vicinity will point to this Sam Raimi movie tie-in, where the first movie-based game was a solid enough affair, giving you a great combat system and an excuse for some wall-crawling stealth sections. It was the second that paired Spidey with a GTA-style open world, changing the very nature of how pretty much every future game starring the wallcrawler would be done, with quests now spread across an entire city and, best of all, random missions springing up whenever your Spidey sense would tingle. You could redirect your swings and leap into action, saving everything from ongoing heists to kids' balloons that were floating away. Spider-Man 2 captured the very essence of what it's like looking after an entire city for days on end, and we all spend countless hours doing exactly that. Although the sequel to this would royally scupper its chances at a third installment thanks to completely missing the mark on what made the original so great. Part 1 really was a phenomenal title, twinning Baldur's Gate, Diablo-esque combat with a team of writers who knew Marvel's universe like the back of their hand. Everyone from MODOK to Black Panther, Moon Knight and Ghost Rider got in on the action. Not to mention the more expected inclusions like Iron Man or Spidey rounding off the roster nicely. That's as well as the fact brawling felt immediately responsive, featuring a great sense of progression towards unlocking some slick screen clearing special moves, and the acknowledgement of team-specific powers, meaning if you paired up members of the X-Men, Fantastic Four or Avengers together it benefited your XP greatly. The fact the closest iteration to this fantastic game formula is the device of Marvel Heroes microtransaction-a-thon is a huge misstep. As any who played this, or will seek it out after reading this, can attest to, there's rarely been a game that ticks so many Marvel fans' boxes so well. Speaking of there rarely being any games that just instantly connoted that sense of Marvel magic, it was abundantly lathered over this PlayStation debut for the wall crawler back in 2000. Although GTA 3 was the first game to ever do a full open world across an entire game, the opening area of this Spidey title was revolutionary, letting you dart across any number of rooftops on your way to saving some hostages from a bank heist. Fighting was fun and your combat options were hugely varied, something that when the story moved at a startling pace tied everything together perfectly. Everyone from Venom to Daredevil, Scorpion and even the Punisher himself showed up throughout the story. But the whole thing was introduced by none other than Stan Lee, providing narration with his warm, soothing tone that puts him up there with Morgan Freeman in the Best Voice Ever awards.